happiness is his kind of big theme that he studies tough stuff. And he obviously pulled into from the faith and community and friendship and all these different things that kind of build up human happiness. But he had an interesting thing talking about like you don't have to go back in the that you can basically just go back to our grandparent and how there were certain parts of their lives that were a lot easier than ours, but certain things that were a lot harder. And so one of the things he talked about with life is he's like normal life of just like getting up, going to work, like having community, having friends, having children, right? Getting married, like just kind of going about normal life was just a lot easier. Just kind of came more naturally because it was kind of like everybody did it. And it's this societal breaking away from that that has made all of those kind of foundations of happiness a lot more difficult to attain, and you have to be more intentional with it. Simultaneously, life is easier in so many ways for us nowadays with just technology and comforts and those sorts of things. But you also have the kind of downsides of technology that you have to kind of hamper down and be careful with, right? Mitigating or just limiting your screen time, video games, whatever that kind of stuff is that distracting you and constantly keeping your mind going at a million miles an hour, or being very distracted and noisy and those sorts of things. And so I think it's an interesting thing to look at how in our lives are we trying to pursue the good things that have always existed and are always available to us, which is the things like friendship, family, meaning, those sorts of things, and also trying to limit the distractions, right? So we can really emphasize the ways that our lives are easier nowadays. Like, how can we make the most of those while also trying to limit the things that do make it a little bit harder for men today, for the world today, things like just being addicted to our phone screens and obviously the many rabbit holes of sin that can lead us down as well. What is kind of your approach to that in just your life as far as pursuing, yeah, just meaningful, being intentional with your friendships and your relationships, especially as a priest? I'm curious to know what that looks like for you now, even just as much as like, do you live with other priests or do you live by yourself? Like, how does that look, especially in your role as vocations director? But then also, what are some of your restrictions or limits that you put on yourself for some of the temptations of today, whether that's TV time or phone screen time or those sorts of things?
Yeah, certainly, some of the things that I think have to be in place. You just mentioned right there, like pursuing the good. The Catechism of the Catholic Church says the virtuous man is he who practices the good. It means it's something that we're constantly practicing, right? It's not something that's passive. It's something that we're intentionally engaging in, right? And so, how is that lived out in each of our lives? Well, a priest's life obviously has different responsibilities and maybe a different outlook at time, a different perspective, but at the same time, it's still human. One of those things you mentioned about, kind of having that accountability or the ways that we live. Right now, I've been entrusted a house by the bishop that is meant to be kind of like an Airbnb for priests. It's an old religious house that we have in the diocese. It's been renovated to kind of like make it a place where guys would want to come, but it's got 15 bedrooms. It's a place where guys can come and have their own space, and like they can take their day off here. They can come and do a week-long retreat if they want to do that. They can come and do a desert day and be by themselves, or they can like call their buddies like from all around the diocese and meet in one place that's not their own home, and they do that here. So I get to host that house. It's also a place where our seminarians gather when they're home. So right now I don't live with any particular priest full time. However, each week there's guys that are always passing through and coming to stay, and whether I'm here or not, it's a house that's well used, and so I get to see a lot of priest brothers, a lot of the seminarians when they're home, and I also get to use it to do different vocation events. I have a huge front yard, a huge soccer field out there, as you can imagine. It doubles as football as well, but it's an incredible place to be able to build that fraternity. And as we said before, like practicing virtue together, living life together, that accountability that comes through fraternity, friendship is always going to be necessary, and that's certainly just one of the ways that I found that makes me well and allows me to seek excellence.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's such an important thing, I think, to have a setup and just to kind of take time. I encourage a lot of people to think about their lives as far as business owners, right? Or CEOs. I think about CEO Powell Alex Jones. He's pretty good about doing this and taking time to go on retreats, both for his personal life, but also you have to kind of step back as a business owner sometimes. And I you have to do what's called working on the business, right? Not just working in the business, but working
Right.
on the business. And this is true for stay-at-home moms, right? I encourage Emily to do this frequently or occasionally, however, at least once a quarter. To be like, sometimes you have to just step away and feel like, how is this going? Like, where can we improve? where am I struggling or being depleted that I can maybe, patch up a hole in the boat and really think about my life in that way. I did it this morning. I was plus one thing we're trying to really enter into while we're here in actually 24/7 adoration minutes down the road from us. And so I woke up this morning and went down and had a holy hour there. And it was something that I was really trying to be intentional. There's all these thoughts about the day and the week and stresses and, oh, I got to do this. And, my to-do list and task list and all these things, but also just wanting to step back and be like, all right, Lord, how am I doing? Let's go through the pillars of excellence. And how am I doing mentally? How am I doing emotionally? Where can I improve? What do you see me? What's the kind of next step for me? What do you think is kind of this next phase? What am I not thinking about that I should be thinking about? And just kind of zooming out a little bit. One, I think it helps you to get a little bit more better control of your life and have a better awareness of what's going well and what's not, and not just this kind of nagging negative feeling of stress or anxiety, but it allows you to actually zoom out. And I think that this is one of the places that a lot of people don't do that is with friendship, or even just thinking about kind of mental health or mental toughness, or just kind of where's my mind at? How am I doing? To be able to kind of zoom out, and that I think is something that a lot of guys are missing in today's world when they start to see themselves getting stressed and overwhelmed and just kind of bogged down by the worries of life. And so let me ask you this. Let's talk about a little bit of adversity that people face and challenges that people face in life. And so there's obviously going to be a lot of hardship. One of the funny things that Dr. Brooks said yesterday is he was like, my students will come after I say that suffering is what gives life meaning and say, well, what should I just go out and look for suffering? He says, don't worry, it's going to find you. But one of the things that we have to deal with is how do you respond when you suffer? Who are you when you're
Right.
faced with suffering? And so how do you kind of coach, especially these young priests? In today's world, it's not easy to be a priest. It's not easy to wear your collar out in public all the time. I'm sure that you can expand on the feelings of that, or conversations you've had with other priests about that, perhaps. But how do you kind of coach it and help form young men in how to deal with the adversity and difficulties coming in life?
Like Arthur Brooks said, like suffering is inevitable. Like hardship is going to come in life. We don't necessarily have to seek it out. Although sometimes in our Catholic tradition, right, we do add penances or mortifications because we realize that suffering in and of itself does make us strong. Like suffering is a school, and I think so. When we approach suffering, I think there has to be a particular mindset. One is maybe a more practical mindset, and one is maybe a more theological or supernatural mindset. And I think that the practical mindset is the reality is like, what do we do in excellence that we haven't struggled with, right? Because excellence actually is usually defined by going beyond what is simple or pleasurable, right? It has to be something that we strive after. I often use, even my own life. I think back, like if you want to be a great athlete, like what separates the greatest athletes in the world from mediocre athletes, are the ones that are playing in the same league, but maybe haven't made that same name for themselves. And some of that is, yes, ability, but also it's like the you hear the stories of Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, and we could name people in other sports as well, but those are like super popular names of like knowing their training regimen. People who really suffered to be good, if we could say it that way. People who put in more time than anybody else. There's a mindset that doing what is hard and doing what no one else wants to do, as Dr. J once said, like, what is the definition of a professional? It's someone who does what they love to do on days that they don't want to do it, right? That's what it is to be excellent. So, in a certain way, if you're going to not only just be an athlete, if you're going to be successful in business, if you're going to be successful in military, as you often talk about, if you're going to be successful as a mother of young children, right, as your wife is experiencing, it's going to be doing the hard things. It's very easy to live an unvirtuous life. You don't have to do anything, but to embrace what is difficult. That's what makes us better. That's what makes us excellent. And so we have to be willing. That's got to be the practical mindset. Then you offer to that the supernatural mindset, right? The supernatural mindset is that, remember what Jesus, like the first thing he said to be a disciple: deny yourself. We're not living for pleasure. Like the life that we live as a Christian is not in itself for pleasure. It is for something more. It is for glory, right? And so how do we start to embrace that? He says, if you deny yourself, you'll be great, right? You're gonna come and follow me. You're gonna take up your cross. You're gonna struggle through this, but that's what excellence looks like. That's what success looks like in this life is following the Christ.